Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel or welcome to my channel. I'm Bert's Politics, and in this video I'm going to be giving an overview of the last week's news from the war in Ukraine, from the Ukrainian offensive in Zaporizhzhia, as well as recent advances from Kherson, as well as the fallout of the Wagner group's revolt against Russia. So let's get into it. First, we have to, of course, cover the recent Ukrainian counteroffensives, which have begun from Zaporizhzhia towards the south. And as we know, Zaporizhzhia is the main Ukrainian supply base, and they've been moving south from there, from Novosibirsk, from Orkiv, from Velka Novosibirsk to the east, and even Vledar is kind of the far east point of this offensive. And what they're doing is they're quite simply they're trying to get as close as they can to the main Russian way or supply zone in the area. They're trying to come south, get to the railway. And they know if they could get to the railway, they could eventually take maybe Berdyansk, maybe they could take Mariupol, maybe they could even go southwest and they could drive for Melitopol. But the main point is they would be getting towards the sea. And if they were able to get to the sea, it would cut off the Russian troops currently fighting in Donetsk and in Luhansk against Ukrainian counteroffensives or trying to make offenses on their own, especially towards Bakhmut or towards the main Russian city of Donetsk. And it would cut those forces off from the forces to the west, who are currently defending against the Ukrainian offensives from Kherson amid the thought of the Kakhovka Dam being blown up by the Russians, which is all but confirmed now following news that the main bridge supports, the parts that were holding up the dam that were made out of concrete, have completely disappeared. They've been exploded, and this means it was likely not hit by artillery, but rather it was mined in advance. And of course, the Ukrainians wouldn't have been able to mine the Kakhovka Dam in advance because the Ukrainians don't control Kakhovka or the Kakhovka Dam. The Russians had control of it at the time. Furthermore, we also have news that there are currently issues with the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant over here, and this has been because of not only the Kakhovka Dam, which has kind of flooded this whole region down here, but it's also been an issue further upstream because the rest of the Dnipro River has seen a lot of fighting, especially artillery or air bombardment or missile strikes from the Russians, particularly the cities of Dnipro and Zaporizhzhia itself, the two main supply hubs for the Ukrainians of this offensive down into the Melitopol Oblast from Zaporizhzhia. Now, it would be wrong to say that all is well for the Ukrainians right now because there have been some slight Russian gains. We know that the Russians continued to hold Bakhmut in the far east, and of course that they have maintained their control of the pre-2014 front line in Donetsk and Horlivka, and the Ukrainians really have been kind of struggling to take any more territory in this region, and also in Zaporizhzhia itself, south of it. We've seen the Ukrainians kind of struggling to make a lot of advances, at least quick advances, because there's been a lot of rain recently over the past week, and it has turned the roads into mud. And the Ukrainians, of course, they rely on maneuver warfare, they rely on tanks and Western-backed trucks, jeeps, etc. And these all require stable roads and stable ground, and that's really not something that exists in this area of the front line. This whole front line right here, that is all currently just mud, and that means the Ukrainians are, of course, unable to advance as quickly as they would like. However, an area where the Ukrainians are doing a lot better, at least recently, is Kherson. Now, if we go all the way down towards Kherson in the southwest of the front, we have this tiny advance where there's roughly 10 to 15 kilometers of land where the Ukrainians have now made a bridgehead on the other side of the bank. And this comes in the aftermath of the Russians blowing that Kakhovka Dam. So that, of course, is major, major news for the Ukrainians, because if they are able to take Kherson's outer ring of cities, especially Oleshki or Holopristan, they could potentially advance along this railway south to the Crimea, or they could even advance east and try and take Melitopol, either of which would be very bad news for the Russians. And the Russians, of course, aren't going to let that happen, or they're going to try not to let that happen. But for now, at least, it remains to be seen if the Russians are going to be able to successfully retake this bridgehead. And right now, it's definitely not looking like they will. The Russians have really been kind of in disarray along much of the front, especially in the outskirts of Kherson following the Kakhovka Dam being blown up, but also in other areas of the front, such as Bakhmut, where they've struggled a lot following Wagner pulling their forces out. Ukraine has slowly but surely been trying to encircle the city. They've been making advances from the north and the south of the city, just not through the center. So while the Russians maintain control of Bakhmut, the Ukrainians are making advances on that front. And elsewhere, the Russians really don't seem to be that much better off. The Russians have really struggled to make any notable progress in any area of the front in recent weeks, and it's probably not gotten better for them since Wagner revolted, taking a huge number of troops out of the fight and potentially into Belarus with the leader Prigozhin. So that's the updates from the last week. Now, what can we expect to happen in the coming weeks? Well, of course, as I said, we know that the Ukrainians are going to try and take this area right in front of Velikonossivka. There's a lot of Russian defenses there, but if they could take it, as we said, they could cut this railway. They could even get to Berdyansk or many of these other cities down here. We also know, of course, the Ukrainians have tried to establish a bridgehead over Kherson, and if they were able to do so, that would, of course, be a huge win for them, potentially going along either of the main railways, trying to take those cities. But those probably won't happen yet. I think the next major battle of the war that we're going to be seeing is actually in Bakhmut, where we will see the Ukrainians launch their attacks on the outskirts of the city. So, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.